In this video, I want to focus on one smaller feature that will also come in pretty handy whenever you're writing text, which other word processors already feature, but which Zettlr somehow takes to a next level. The feature I'm talking about is AutoCorrect and Magic Quotes. So let's get into it. Again, I'm using here the interactive tutorial because it's like a great starting point to explain all of these things, including the feature focusing on today, which is AutoCorrect. By default, AutoCorrect is active and Magic Quotes as well, and you can find all the preferences in the AutoCorrect tab within the general preferences of the application. As you can see, AutoCorrect is always turned on by default. You can obviously also turn it off if you do not want this. What AutoCorrect does is basically to take some characters and look for some sequences of characters that it can replace. As you can see, Zettlr ships with a lot of really useful AutoCorrect sequences that you will likely use. For instance, apart from the arrows, what you can also see are fractions, which are being replaced by their typographic equivalent. You can also see that, for instance, square millimeters, square centimeters, etc. will also be replaced with the typographically correct characters. Also, you have several currency symbols and something that I personally really like, the automatic replacement of 3 dots by the typographically correct sign, an ellipsis. And you can add more of these sequences by simply hitting the plus button and adding first on the left side of the table your character that the editor should look for, and then on the right side what it should replace the character sequence with. This feature is especially useful for when you use Windows, because on both macOS and I think any Linux distribution I know of, you can actually use the Alt key or the Option key to create additional characters that are not present on the default keyboard layout. So for instance, the ellipsis character can be created. The trademark character, for instance, can also be created. A lot of different characters can be created using these keys. But on Windows, you always need to press the Alt key and hit some very cryptic number on your numpad, which most people obviously do not want. So this is meant as a convenience for you to not having to worry about the correct typographic characters. Obviously, you can also use the AutoCorrect table to create text replacements for specific names for places, in case you're just lazy and you have to write like a really long word multiple times. You can just create an abbreviation for this and have it expand to the longer word. Closely related to the AutoCorrect feature, you have the Magic Quotes feature. Magic Quotes is not that magic, but what it refers to is the ability of Zettlr to replace your quote signs, just like any word processor does, with the typographically correct ones. If you look here into these 2 drop-down menus, you can see that we have actually researched all possible combinations of primary and secondary magic quotes so that you can choose which ones you actually want to use. In case you want to use a default combination, you can either choose English, German, French, or Japanese, or none, which will reset Magic Quotes back to its default. The default is always the first option, so in case you do not want to use Magic Quotes, simply choose the first option. A last thing I want to show you is the style with which AutoCorrect will perform. You have first the so-called LibreOffice style and the Word style. We basically chose these names because we realized that both word processors do handle AutoCorrect differently. Word is extremely aggressive, and as soon as you finish one of the sequences in this table, it automatically immediately replaces it. Whereas LibreOffice requires you to either press space or press enter before AutoCorrect will actually trigger and replace something. This is also important for you to choose which one to use. because some people prefer to having aggressively replace everything and then use the backspace character to undo this. Whereas some other people choose the LibreOffice style because in this way you can prevent one single autocorrect replacement. If you press Shift space or Shift enter, autocorrect will also not trigger, which can be useful to prevent autocorrect from replacing once. Please also remember that magic quotes are tied to autocorrect. So if you turn off autocorrect, magic quotes will also turn off regardless of the setting. But if you turn on autocorrect, magic quotes will also work. But if you choose the first option, it will basically act as if it's disabled, because the first option basically tells it not to replace any of the quote signs. So let's see what this turns out to be in reality. Let's, for instance, choose the French magic quotes and the LibreOffice style. So if we are now here in our document and we want to write something, then we can write a text and see what happens to the quotes. As you can see, whenever I press the quote character, it will actually insert either the beginning or the ending magic quote. In the case of French, for instance, you have this small space in between the text and the quote sign. This is because in French typography, it is actually mandatory to have a little bit of spacing. This is not a normal space, but a smaller space that is required by French typography before and after the quoted text. It is important to note that autocorrect and magic quotes will not work within code blocks in order to enable you to write code naturally. So if you're someone who requires to write code blocks from time to time, you can actually do this by creating a Markdown block and, for instance, just writing something. Here you can see magic quotes has not triggered. These are normal quotes. And also, if you are to, for instance, write it will not be replaced with the ellipsis sign. This is even more useful when it comes to general front matters, because in general front matters you sometimes, as you can see here in this file, you need to quote unquote text as well, and without having to worry about autocorrect replacing some of the code words. This concludes today's video. To learn more about autocorrect and magic quotes, make sure, as always, to check out the documentation where we explain everything that you could just see in much greater detail. And always remember, if you like this video, subscribe and also hit the notification bell to get a notification whenever we upload a new video to this series. Thanks for watching.